Hey guys, don't forget to leave a like and smash that subscribe button. It'll help me a lot, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out. So I recently just read an article for The Rise of the Skywalker, and to be honest, I hate it. I hate it with every conceivable notion in my body. And what I have left. So, Ryan Johnson, the lovable man, sent out a tweet a couple days ago, right when Game of Thrones aired its famous episode 3, season 8 episode. So apparently, the characters in episode 9 are going to face a new threat from the great beyond, which is the outer reaches of space, which is the unobservable part of the universe in the Star Wars universe. If you don't know, the observable universe is the universe that you can see, right? That you can see with the telescope or whatever. But this part of the universe that this new threat's going to come is going to come from the great beyond, and it's going to force all the characters to work together. Hell, even Kylo Ren might face some backlash for what happened with General Snoke. But still, doesn't this plotline kind of sound familiar, especially with the recent episode of Game of Thrones that we just watched? How many times has this happened already? Isn't this kind of a cliche thing where characters put their differences aside to face a common enemy? Yes, that sounds good on paper. It didn't really work in Game of Thrones, at least thus far. We are still left with 3 episodes of Game of Thrones, but to be honest, I kind of gave up on the show. I guess I'll still watch it when I have time, but I'm not going to rush to watch it like I did with episode 3. When episode 3 aired, I rushed to watch that shit. But, after watching that episode, I can officially say that, well, my taste buds have been filled. I've gotten my fair taste of Game of Thrones. I don't really give a shit what happens in Game of Thrones. At least we got Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame at least ended on a subtle, great note. Now they can start with Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I'm not really looking forward to, seeing that they already butchered Spider-Man, who is one of my most all-time favorite Marvel comic characters, and the X-Men. The X-Men are by far one of my favorite comic books to ever be written. Like, yes, I'm a big X-Men fan, and to be honest, I fucking hate the movies with a passion. Ryan Johnson can literally die in a horrible hospital fire, and I will not give a flying fuck. It's safe to say that at this point, I have no high hopes for Star Wars. I have no more high hopes for Game of Thrones. This year was supposed to be the year. The year where almost 40 years of Star Wars was in the making, and it finally comes to a conclusion. This is supposed to be the year where a show that lasted almost a decade, actually over a decade, supposed to come to a conclusion, but only for it to be fucked in just one episode. At least Marvel, a Marvel that's been around for years, at least a little bit longer than Star Wars, at least they finally got a cinematic universe. Unlike DC, DC has been around a lot longer than Marvel, yet they can't get their shit together. Why is it that only Marvel can get their shit together? Granted that Star Wars and Marvel are now both owned by Disney in the movie franchise, but why? Why did they think that Star Wars would be good as a multiple choice movie just like Marvel? Why couldn't they just focus all their time and money and effort on one single movie? Episode 8, Episode 9, that's what I'm talking about. Episode 8 of Star Wars, The Last Jedi, really just ruined Star Wars for me. You may think that I'm just a sad fanboy all because I just didn't like, The Last Jedi, but I just couldn't help myself because The Last Jedi literally destroyed childhoods. I've heard people having their childhoods ruined, but no, The Last Jedi really royally fucked everything about the Jedi. Everything about the lore, everything. We didn't give a shit. We didn't give a fuck. It's like watching Batman off an entire factory full of people. You know, that's just not Batman. Batman doesn't kill people. But Luke fucking Skywalker, the guy that spent an entire movie trying to save his father, even though his father killed quite a bunch of people and committed mass genocides, he's scared by his nephew, decides to say, okay, fuck everything that I learned in episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and I'm just going to go and murder my nephew. Everything about The Last Jedi could have easily been avoided had they just told Poe what their plan was, and the Imperial Starship, whatever the fuck that was, had Finn just not gone off to that casino for whatever reason. Think about it. If Finn had never gone to the casino, or whatever, had never gone to that planet in The Last Jedi, nothing in the plot would literally change. If Rey and Luke actually showed legitimate training, then maybe we would have a little more believability of Rey's ability in the use of the Force. But no, No, we have no faith in her character. She is a Mary Sue. I tried to defend Rey in episode 7, but when episode 8 came out, I just could not for the life of me protect Rey. I could not. There was no redeemable value. Making her parents and her lineage nothing makes absolutely no goddamn sense. Having her be so great in the Force makes no goddamn sense. Having her be this untrained Jedi, but yet better than a trained Sith Lord, or not really a Sith Lord, but you get what I mean. A trained person in the use of a Force like Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, yet she was able to best him. Yes, I know he was shot with a crossbow. Yes, I know that, but still that doesn't negate the fact that she still seems somewhat better than Kylo Ren in fighting. Yes, she still needs help from time to time, and yes, she still needed his help to defeat the Praetorian Guard, whatever the fuck you want to call them. I don't give a shit what they're called. Star Wars at this point has no redeemable value for me. So what this plotline says for me, that this new threat is going to come from out of nowhere, to me, that's lazy writing, because that's been done already. That's being done right now in Game of Thrones, because that's what's supposed to be done. That was supposed to happen in Game of Thrones. Granted, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan you'll ever find. I never was. I was never that big of a Star Wars fan, but I did love the lore. I do love fantasy. I do love movies. I do love reading books. And Star Wars was a universe that I actually held dear to my heart, that I actually cared for. I actually cared about Luke. I actually cared about Leia. I actually cared about Han Solo. I actually cared about R2-D2 and C-3PO. And the recent passing of Peter Mayhew of Chewie, God bless his soul. Like, that guy, he entertained millions, and all he said was, that's all he did. That's all he did, and he made millions of people happy. That's how great Star Wars is, and that's how much of an impact it's had. All because one guy went, because of that one line, because of that one growl, whatever you want to call it, made millions happy. And now Star Wars, Game of Thrones, DC, Marvel, they're becoming something that I just can't really enjoy anymore. And the thing is, I certainly don't believe that fans are that picky. We just want something to enjoy. We just want you to give us what we want. We don't want you to change the norm. We don't want your characters to be woke. We don't want your characters to conform to feminism or whatever. We want your characters to actually be enjoyable. We don't care if your character is gay. We don't care if your character is black. As long as it is essential to a story, then we'll actually care. We don't care if your character is a female. We don't care if your character is white. We don't care. We just don't care. We just want good movies. And yet, there's so much emphasis being put on these movies these days of being so woke and pushing this agenda down our throat like we want it. It's happening in Star Wars. It's kind of happening in Marvel. It hasn't really happened yet in DC, but it's gonna happen eventually. And now, Game of Thrones, it hasn't happened yet, but Game of Thrones is suffering right now from bad writing. And that's the thing with all of our mediums now. Either it's too woke or it has bad writing. Star Wars or Game of Thrones, you know? Like, there's only so many things that can actually entertain people, that actually make people feel invested. There's a reason why millions of people tuned into Game of Thrones. There's a reason why millions of people love Star Wars. There's millions of reasons why people love these movies, DC, Marvel. It's because we found characters to enjoy, because we found stories to enjoy. There's a lot of other stories that do that, but not on the same level as these things. In short, I don't want to believe that us fans are really that picky when it comes to our mediums. I don't think fans are really asking for much. We just want you to give us what we want in movies, in TV shows, and from the books. We want you to at least be competent in your writing. And things like what happened in Game of Thrones episode 3 season 8 is not really redeemable, especially when you've been building it up for a decade. What's happening with Star Wars is not redeemable. That's something that's been out for over 40 years, and now you basically destroyed the entire childhoods of many. And now Marvel is on this verge of being so woke. I mean, they're on the verge of it. I'm almost at the point to where I really don't give a shit about Marvel movies anymore. You know, to be honest, I never really gave a shit that much. I still go watch them just to enjoy it. But if they're really gonna push this agenda down our throat, then I have no reason to go to the movies. I'm finding more and more that I have no reasons to go to the movies anymore, or see a TV show. I'd rather have more entertainment and joy reading a book or watching older movies or watching older TV shows. That's just the sad fact of life. We want to enjoy our mediums. We want you to give us what we want. We don't care if a character is female. We don't care if a character is black, Mexican, Asian, white. We don't care as long as it's essential to the story. We don't care about this wokeness. Ripley was a female in the Alien franchise, and yet no one gave a shit because she was a woman, but she was a complete badass. Wonder Woman came out, no one gave a shit that she was a woman, and yet we just enjoyed the movie. Yes, she has some sex appeal, I'll admit that, some sex appeal, but other than that, we all knew that, hey, Wonder Woman's a badass character. That's not someone you want to fuck with. But yet, Captain Marvel comes out and she acts like she's the first thing since sliced bread, that it's never happened before. The same thing with Black Panther. The Black Panther movie acts like it's been the first superhero movie ever, but it seems like everyone forgot about Blade. And then there's Competence. The lore of Star Wars and the Jedi training, the Jedi way. Luke Skywalker and his arch for Darth Vader and his story arc. Luke Skywalker, just Luke Skywalker in general. Everything about the Jedi and the Force was thrown out the window in The Last Jedi. Everything. At least episode 7 had some redeemable qualities about it. At least they could have made that a better movie with the sequel that actually explained a lot of shit in episode 7. But when episode 8 came out, everything that happened in episode 7 just didn't fucking matter. Everything that happened in episode 6 just didn't fucking matter. Everything that happened in Star Wars just didn't fucking matter thanks to episode 8, because it really just destroyed the lore. And yet the norms and people are acting like things are not woke enough, and no matter what is being put in our medium, it's just not woke enough. Mortal Kombat is a great example. Mortal Kombat is a violent video game where people get their hearts ripped out, their skulls crushed, and all this gory shit, and yet people are offended because the female ninjas dress kind of sexually. Really, a guy just had his heart ripped out and was just split in half like a wishbone, and yet the one thing you're worried about is the females are over-sexualized. Don't we have stuff like that? Don't we have PG movies? Don't we have PG-13 where people can go and watch something that is not as sexualized or has no sexuality whatsoever, like PG-13 movies, or at least PG movies for the most part? If you're really that offended by sexuality, there's always children's stories, and children's stories tend to not really have any sexuality, any sexual innuendos whatsoever. And if they do, then that's just fucking weird, because it's a kid's book. I just had an argument recently with someone saying that, oh, the market is oversaturated with over-sexuality, but yet I promise you, I can find dozens, maybe hundreds of books of females in those books that are not over-sexualized. I could watch thousands of movies, literally thousands of movies, where the female characters are not sexualized. I can watch 1,000 movies that don't have any blood and gore, yet we're not woke enough. And the thing is, most of this is coming from fake fans. What are fake fans? They're fans that don't even watch Game of Thrones, that don't even play Mortal Kombat, that don't even watch Star Wars. You know, those are fake fans. If it's not your shit, then leave it alone. Go find something else to fuck. Go find something else to watch if you're that offended, because I promise you, if you're gonna be that offended by what females wear in Mortal Kombat, you're gonna be offended by everything. Because guess what? Sex sells. It's fucking true. Sex, violence, and tragedy. Those three things sell in movies and in stories. And if you don't see that, then you're a fucking moron. I'm sorry. But Mr. Lion, what does this have to do with Star Wars? Like, we're not talking about sex in Star Wars. It has everything to do with Star Wars. The horrible writing in Game of Thrones, the wokeness of the Marvel movies, and now just not giving a shit about past continuity of movies, which has to do with Star Wars. Everything in the mediums are changing. They're changing because people feel like it. They don't give a shit about what the continuity says. They don't give a shit about the lore. They just want to make it as they wanted to make it. Rian Johnson never gave a shit about the continuity. He just wanted to make the movie the way he wanted. He just wanted to make people talk. He wanted to shit all over the Jedi. He didn't care about Star Wars. Rian Johnson was the wrong person for the job. Rian Johnson should be a perfect example of a director that just doesn't care about the audience, that doesn't care about the story, doesn't care about the characters, and it's happening more and more in movies these days. And so you can take what you want of it. You may think I'm a sexist just because I disagree with Rey, who I think is a Mary Sue. You may think but at this moment, I just don't give a shit. I'm done with Star Wars. Maybe I'll see episode 9 one day, but I'm in no rush to go see it at the theaters, because at this point, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about the Marvel movie. And I know there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people out there there that agree with me. Maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe a million, that are just done. They're done with the wokeness. They're done with people being offended by sexuality, but not offended by violence. They're done. They're done with being silent. And most importantly, we're just done with having our lore and our continuity fucked with. Star Wars has had a lot of continuity problems in the past, but at this point, there's no redeemable value whatsoever. At this point, I just don't give a flying fuck. And if you do, that's great, but this guy is going.